we have Frederike Kaltheuner. Is that right? Please. Okay, please join us on the live stage and have a seat wherever you like. You're the first person to sit in our couch situation.
We don't know quite how this works.
Yeah, we don't know
both
quite.
going
Let's
here?
sit in the middle, and then
okay.
and then we can have our guests. Okay, super. Okay, great. So your mic works?
I think so. Does it?
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Well, that was a wonderful panel. Thank you so much. It was, we were just speculating about these ideas, and then to switch over to you, who just very eloquently gives the full spectrum, felt very luxurious. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you.
And could you introduce yourself, as you carry many titles and have been associated with many different organizations? Could you, for anyone who is just joining us, could you introduce yourself once more?
Of course. So I'm Frederike Kaltheuner, and how I describe the kind of work I do is I always say I work in tech policy. So broadly, the questions that fascinate me and that concern me is how can we not just regulate technology, but also really shape what the future of digitization and technology should look like. And currently I run something called the European AI Fund. It's an initiative by 12 foundations, and the fund exists to strengthen the voice of civil society and public interest actors in Europe.
Super. I mean, I know that we want to ask you about GDPR, of course, at some point, because I think you have some interesting ways of speaking about it. I mean, I don't know if it's okay to even jump in with that question that we were just asking, unless did you have another prompt?
What question we were just
asking? Yeah, how young people, where they can find agency in this.
Sure.
Or?
Go for it, yeah.
Okay. We were just saying, in a little bit, another member, Amelia, will join us, and she's working a lot with young people and their relationship to AI and AI policy. So you work on a policy basis with different organizations and maybe companies trying to prepare them to set up better systems or to protect their users in better ways. So much responsibility is on the user. Every time you get to a website, you're supposed to read 10,000 words and then say no 10 times. You just want to order a pizza, And so especially you think for young people who are so online, where can they find agency in this? What can they do that can feel somewhat proactive about pushing back against bias in algorithms, but also being able to meet their friend at the club?
Someone smarter than me said cookie notices are to tech policy what recycling is to climate change.
This is what we were talking about. Exactly.
And I think there's from companies who do not. So I think it's important to understand we're dealing with incredibly powerful companies with unlimited resources, and of course there is some regulation where companies are really eager and keen to get involved and to be regulated because they don't want to be the ones making the decisions. So when it comes to things like hate online, but the moment it's about their business model, which in its current form for most companies, it's collecting data and targeting advertising. Companies do not want to be regulated, full stop. And a very common technique is pushing the responsibility to the end user. So the consent notices you see everywhere, they are very often unlawful. Consent, how it's defined in the law, has to be a lot of things. Sometimes has to be explicit, but the idea has never been that you have to make a choice on every website you go. Because I could make that choice once and for all, let's say on the system level. I could say, on my phone, in the browser, I decide what my preferences are. So it's not you, it is objectively irritating, and I don't want people to feel guilty or disempowered by clicking yes, agree, because nobody has time for this.
Yeah.
And so the other parallel, so the climate parallel is interesting. The other parallel that I find very fascinating is there are very few other parts of society where we have a similar dynamic going on with regulation. So for example, when you think about product safety like cosmetics, skincare, I'm very much into skincare after the pandemic because that was my hobby.
Great nails, by the way. I noticed them on stage.
But when I, at least sort of in the European Union, when I purchase cosmetics, I assume them to be safe. because they've been tested, and I know that toxic ingredients are banned. And then sometimes there are discussions in society about certain ingredients, whether they maybe should be banned, etc. But my assumption is, if I put cream on my face, I'm not gonna die. This is a very extreme example. Or another one would be, let's say you're in a restaurant, you assume that the food is safe. Like sometimes it's not, but mostly it is, because we have rules and we have enforcement systems that check whether food is safe. We do not have the same for technology. So you can buy a phone, you can download an app. Let's stick with it. You can download an app, and the app can be completely non-compliant with existing laws. And that creates a scenario where people feel very, especially in Germany, where the discourse is a bit different than it is in other parts of Europe, where people feel very irritated. They say, like, can I use this tool? Can I use that? Whereas I would like to live in a world where whatever is available to download should be legal and should comply with existing laws. So it's a very, it's a complex and infuriating and frustrating situation.
Absolutely. I mean, just to the second part of that question, do you have any notes for younger people if they're interested in this problem because they can see that it's shaping their communities and they want to push back against it? What can they do beyond, like, not worrying about not clicking the cookies?
Yeah, I think data is almost a too abstract entry point. I think young people, and I do spend a lot of time on TikTok because I download everything, I use everything, because I think I need to know what is happening and how things work, and also what the discussions are. There are a lot of discussions online on things like, how does the recommender algorithm work? Is TikTok shadow banning Black communities, for example, is a discussion that is being held on apps like TikTok. Or I recently, the other weekend, I met a very young woman from France who launched an initiative against hate and harassment. Because in France, they noticed that there has been a phenomenon where particularly young women had seen a rise in revenge porn. It's even the wrong word, but like being blackmailed for nudes they sent, etc. So I think young people are very, very engaged and aware of what the issues are. But you're right. I think when it comes to discussions about regulation, I don't think young people are represented enough, and they don't have a voice. And there's a tendency in debates to say, well, young people don't care, or there are a lot of cliches, when I think in reality, this is absolutely not the case.
Yeah.
The entry point might not be data privacy.
Right.
But at the same time, that's also maybe a good thing, because data privacy, yes, it's important, but it's really about something else. So the reason why I care about data politics is because it is about something so fundamental. It's about imbalances of power between people, government, and companies.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in power, and I'm interested in justice questions. And that's why I'm interested in data, and not the other way around. But it's a connection that not everyone makes, and it's also not often how it's perceived.
Yeah.
Privacy. Oh, I shouldn't be saying this, but I think sometimes debates about data privacy have a bit of a branding problems, and also sometimes they haven't always been inclusive and broad enough. They have been very, very, I don't want to say neoliberal, but libertarian. So it's about my data and my privacy, and I want to be left alone. But we've all just spent a year in lockdown. We don't want to be alone. Right. We want to be connected with others. We want to share. And we want to use technology because technology is amazing. So the discussion is more about how can we make technology work for us.
Yeah. And people-centric. I think I saw where you wrote, we talk about data protection, but what about user protection, which has a more holistic, or maybe that's not exactly the language, but something to that effect, where it's not about protecting the data, it's about protecting the people producing the data. And what
I do not recall saying that, but I think it is a very good point that maybe I made, or my past self made. It's true, like it's really not, it's not about protecting data, it's about protecting people, not just protecting people. I would actually even go further. It's about empowering people. And there are a lot of misconceptions about the word data protection, which is why I often prefer to speak about data rights, because that's something quite powerful. It's like no matter what you do with your data, you can share them with anyone. You still have rights over them, and I think that's something very powerful, including, I don't know, if you gave it to someone and change your mind, you can change your mind. And I think that's something positive.
Absolutely.
And you can also share them. You can share them for research. You can literally do whatever you want with your data, what data protection does, it gives you rights over this data, and it's based on the, well, historical knowledge and insight that, well, you can use information against people.
Yeah, right.
They can be used to harm you, and that's why we need people to have rights over the data.
Yeah.
I wonder if anecdotally, maybe you don't know, but I find it really interesting that TikTok kind of inspired people to reverse engineer what are ultimately black box algorithms, though, right? I mean, do you know how effective that actually is, or is actually I don't know, it has some potential in the future to be reverse engineering these black box algorithms?
So people have always been trying to reverse engineer recommender system.
Right.
And the reason why they do this is marketers, like search engine optimization. So this is like the job in lots of companies employ someone to optimize their website for Google search. You could say that's trying to reverse engineer the search algorithm.
Right.
So companies have a little bit of a tension here. If you completely disclose how your recommender system works, then spammers will game it. So you cannot be completely transparent. But at the same time, recommender system, including search, but including, let's say, the Facebook newsfeed, the Instagram story feed, and the TikTok algorithm, they do have implications for individuals and for society as a whole.
Right.
And so I love, this is more of my hobby, but I love taking screenshots of people who comment on the algorithm, because I find it interesting. So sometimes on YouTube, you have a random video that gets recommended that's 10 years old, and a lot of the comments are, I don't know where this was recommended to me, but it's really fascinating. So for TikTok, I think the TikTok recommender algorithm is fascinating. I don't think there's not a single system I've ever interacted with that knows so many of my deepest secrets. However, and I know we're probably running out of time, but however, what's really fascinating is we only ever see our own recommender system, what is recommended to us.
Yeah, totally.
If you look at your partners, your friends, how the For You page looks for them, what's really interesting is that you'll see a lot of the same videos. So part of it is every now and then there's something that's incredibly accurate and very much about you, but there's also a lot of generic content. So there's a bit of a selection bias happening. And the real challenge is that the way that the platform is built, there are not enough APIs that allow scientists to actually study how the recommender system works. And I think that's a problem. And it's something that, yeah, because it's really important that we have academic research and not just anecdotal evidence.
That's such a strange cat and mouse game, though. That's just like these black box algorithms, and all these teams have to keep this game
somewhat
of catch-up
obscured
going.
and doing that.
I wanted to ask if we have, or do we not have time?
I think we have only a few minutes left. Is that right? Ask our colleagues. Yeah. So maybe before we ask, if we can still end on a question, maybe we should just say, is there any, if people want to find out more about your work, they can follow you on Twitter. You have a great Twitter. I don't know if you want to promote that or anything else that you think people should pay attention to leaving the session?
Not really, to be honest. The one thing is, so I currently work for the European AI Fund. We support great organizations that really are independent and work in the public interest, follow and support these organizations. Then the tiny little plug for myself is, I've edited a book that comes out in about 4 weeks' time. I still have to announce that. And it's a collection of essays about AI pseudoscience and snake oil and hype. And it really is about what AI cannot do.
Great.
And I think we need to have more of a conversation about this. And even I myself, I wrote an essay, I wrote the introduction, I selected the authors. But I recently reread the entire book, and I learned so much myself. So I can really highly recommend that.
And do you have a title for this?
It's called Fake AI.
Fake AI.
And it will come out with a publication called Meatspace Press. But it's also open access, so you can read it for free or buy the book, and it's really nicely designed by an AI.
Cool.
Very meta.
Excellent. Do you want to ask maybe a closing question, or how do we? Are we okay for a closing question, or are we moving? Yes. Okay.
This is sort of related to all of this, but I wondered, could AI and machine learning research, could this be a space where there's a shift in the way people think of open source, where before it always had this sort of idealistic kind of like, yeah, you're doing the right thing using open source software and releasing it open source. But since some of these processes and pattern recognition and algorithms can be dangerous, do you think there could be a conversation that shifts towards maybe responsibility in open source, or open source being maybe taking on a bit more menacing of a connotation because someone might release something that does immense damage?
I don't know if I can answer that question, but I can say that AI research is an area where a lot of papers are being published. So it's an area where there is a lot of knowledge sharing that is happening. I find the idea that you will release this one invention and it's inherently dangerous, I find it a bit, I've never quite been convinced by it. Maybe I can change my mind. But because it also always really depends on where you use it and how you use it and what kind of safeguards. It almost gives AI too much power. And something I was meaning to say during the panel, I don't like the word AI.
Right, of course.
I like the word, but there is a solution. I haven't figured out in German, but in English I always say AI systems or AI techniques. And I think these words are much better at describing what we're talking about. So AI techniques emphasizes the fact that there's not one AI, there are different techniques. And different techniques are appropriate in different contexts. So it's not AI yes or no, but what kind of AI and when. And AI systems, I like this term because it just highlights that it's not an isolated entity with agency, but it's embedded in systems. And that's where a lot of the risks and harms come from.
Right.
And that's hence why the idea that here's this paper and it releases something incredibly dangerous, I'm not...
I'm thinking more like deep fakes and voice cloning and processes like these that can be used for, they could be used for nefarious ends, or
sure, but what about we've had Photoshop forever, right?
Yeah,
and we've learned the deepfake hysteria. I'm not entirely convinced of. We have Photoshop. You can Photoshop anything.
And before that, you could take negatives and you could ghost them together.
In the USSR, they removed people from photographs, right? So sort of the idea that a photo is evidence, we've long moved past that, I think. And then deepfake, just because it's a video, I'm just not really convinced. And then. It's different kind of, and also again a TikTok example. There are a lot of fun videos using deep fakes.
Oh, sure.
Where you have lots of famous people singing the same song to, They are always very artistic, playful, interesting, poetic applications as well. That is not to say that technology is a tool that can be used for good or bad. I don't like that. Sometimes there are technologies that really have systemic consequences and that really raise broader questions. They're not neutral. But at the same time, not convinced. But I like the question.
Although I hope AI continues to remain rather inadequate at unleashing huge dangers. So we'll see.
Well, again, it's not what AI will do to us; it's what we will do through AI.
AI systems.
AI systems.
Sorry to make this complicated, but and there are many exciting applications, and many are not about people. Like object recognition. I find this very fascinating. It has nothing to do with people. So, I guess we need to talk about rights and ethics when we talk about people.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Okay.
All right.
Frederike Kaltheuner, thank you so much for joining us in the live studio and getting to speak informally. We're so lucky. You all are lucky as well to have had this extra extended script. So the festival will continue.
Our
stage.
Has the goods.
Yes, we have the goods. You know where to find the best things. The backstage behind the main stage.
Yes.
On the digital stage, half in the metaverse. We wanted to ask you about meta, but that's a whole nother question. In any case, so I believe that now you will be transported to the exhibition and to Yasmin, the curator. Is that right? Is that still happening? Okay, so stay exactly where you are. This screen will switch you over to a live English version walkthrough of the exhibition with the curator now. We will see, and there she is. Hello, Yasmin. I don't know if she can hear us, but okay, hello. Which camera? Good. And we wish you a very nice journey with Yasmin through the exhibition, and we will see you all back here tomorrow
Yes.
At 1:45 is when I think the room opens, with programming beginning shortly thereafter. So lots of stuff to look forward to in the next 2 days.
Have fun in the exhibition.
Have fun in the exhibition. Have fun in the multiverse,
yes.
which we won't say meta. And thank you again, Frederike, for your time. So, all right. Thank you and good night, and have fun in the exhibition.